I met Ron back in 2009 at an DEP hearing to discuss their new limits on discharges from public wastewater treatment plants. Because at that time, the industry was allowed to take 1% per day of their produced water to public wastewater treatment plants. So think about what you've seen today and the numbers you've heard about. That's a 1 in 100 dilution. And they were literally salinizing the 3 rivers of Pittsburgh. And this was to discuss that. Well, I met this guy, and he says, I'm a farmer from Washington County. We got talking, and he invited me to visit his farm, which I went on Martin Luther King Day in January, and I've never been the same since. And we've been in contact all these years. He's done a lot of advocacy work and has met a lot of people. He's got a background in heavy equipment and sales and working on rigs and servicing wells. And he has infinite knowledge of the industry. So without further ado.
It's been a long journey for my family, my daughter, my son, myself, but they've created a monster now because I know they took my wife's life. But they'll say, prove it. Anecdotal. Bullshit. I've been doing health surveys for Damascus citizens ever since it started, actually. I was documenting information. I used to work with Exxon. I worked with Texaco before they sold out to Chevron. I worked with Pennzoil. There were 4 deep wells that went down in Pennsylvania in 1980, was around 1985. 4 deep wells were taken. Anything about it was whole information in the Appalachian Basin. I worked on 3 out of 4 of them. I lived on site with Mr. de Villiers from Exxon. He's world renowned. I had tools on that job. I had to work with the day driller and night driller. You're up 2 days straight with no rest. Oh, I'm lying. When I worked for Hughes Tool Company, I averaged some months 6,500 miles a month on a company vehicle. I chased 28 rigs. Long story short, a little bit of background. I signed a lease, but I did not sign a lease straight away. Something was telling me something's not right. I didn't know about leasing. I knew about drilling. Ended up signing the lease, but the hook that they used was you were going to get 350,000 cubic feet of gas free a year. Really? Both my grandparents on their farms had free gas from the vertical wells. They never told us that they were drilling either. I figured it out because they didn't know that I had a background. All the questions that I asked, I knew the answers. They lied. So they were supposed to be drilling I think it was the Trenton Black River on the lease. Not Marcellus. Marcellus was never even mentioned. So once I found out, once I kept, digging, and more information came to the surface, and the gas was wet, well, then I'm out there and I'm just screaming to everybody. And telling the people the truth. You got ripped. Everybody got ripped on their leases. These guys stole the reserves in Pennsylvania. I could assure you that. That's why the money floats the way that it floats, because they could afford to get the big law firms. They could get the politicians paid off, the Rendells, the Corbetts, the Wolfs. That's how it works, because they stole the mineral rights. So As time progressed, I'm out there preaching, and the problems just kept getting worse. People were calling me left and right that they were having problems. Cattle dying, children sick, rashes on their bodies. So I started documenting all that, and it was all going to Damascus citizens, and then they were sending it to the ATSDR, and they certainly know who I am. The rare cancers that popped up in Canonsburg with children from Canon Mac, that was me. I gave that information to, I worked with Dave Templeton from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette and Don Hopi, and I told him about the children that I knew, 12. One of those kids that died was a personal friend of mine. It was his son with the Ewing sarcoma. So I've been at this battle for a long time, and it just keeps getting worse. I moved out of here in 19 to Iowa, northeast Iowa, and then in 22, my wife got diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, and she died. For 14 months, I went through hell. She went through hell, and I stuck with her. Back and forth to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, New York. And all she wanted to do was live. And I have seen this over and over in families. So, anyway, just so that you know, the Mayo Clinic in Rochester is in the process of building 3 more buildings as we speak for hematology. The cancer's through the roof. I talked to a number of doctors. I talked to the 3 teams of doctors that worked with her, the nurses that were on the floor, the hematology floor. They're all just amazed. This patients coming in. A number of people were there from North Dakota. What's going on in North Dakota? The Bakken. Well, anyway, let me move forward. This was my farm. And thanks to Bob, they took an aerial. There's the pond. There's my building, my house to the right. As you go down the driveway, I had a right-of-way of about 500 feet across the creek, and up on the bank was the house that I redid. And all hell broke loose when they started to come on, started to drill. It's a better shot with the wells. Number 1 was around 600 feet from the house, the water well. It turned yellow. My water well, my filter system, I just had a filter in there, and that would turn yellow about every week. I used to change that water filter once every 3 months. I was changing it once a week. The water, when it rained, storm water came right down around the house foundation. Washed out the driveway. And my water well was right beside the house. But not a problem. It was all good. You could not work with these guys. They dominate. They tell you how it is. You just got to deal with it. Shouldn't be a problem. And as you go up the driveway, you could see the road up above the pond. That pond was close to 3 acres. It turned black. Killed all the cattails, all the vegetation. And that well, number 3, that was the second test well done in Pennsylvania. That was the second horizontal well And I had silt and I had ditches, which I will get to. Let me go back. 5 feet deep from all the erosion. DEP wouldn't help me at all. Range wouldn't help me at all. Again, it was just, a bunch of lip service. I'm going to jump around here a little bit. The individual that I signed a lease with, his name is Bill Capulles. Bill Capulles worked in Harrisburg for the Game Commission, and he started his own leasing company. And he was a graduate of Penn State, and he was a hydrologist. And this was a letter that he had sent to an individual in Washington County for leasing Cross Creek Park. Anyway, and he has it on, of course, Pennsylvania Game Commission letterhead. So, and this guy, he became a multimillionaire off the leasing, starting his leasing company, because he negotiated the leases, bundled them, and sold them for God knows how much. Then he took 0.5% of your royalty check every month. He had beautiful mailbox money coming in. My neighbors are yelling, they're calling me and all upset, yelling, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? He won't return a phone call. I said, they got us. Then try to get help from a lawyer, a law firm. Industry had a meeting at the Westin back in 13. You could probably look it up, 2013 summit meeting, where the industry had a meeting for the law firms and real estate companies. Why would you do that? It's all organized crime. This thing was so laid out, 100%. This is the day I think John came out, and the brine tanker just left. So he sucked out the water, and the rest of the liquid that's in your line, you can't suck it all out. So there it goes, right on the ground. And when it rains, where does that go? Right to my pond. That is the face of the location that they built. When they cut that location in, they did not even key in at the bottom, which is engineering. When you move dirt, you've got to key it in depending on the slope so that it doesn't wash away with stormwater runoff and it stays in place. Well, they did everything so Mickey Mouse, it was incredible. Of course, my pond is down below. There's your silt fence. Nice job, huh? Right over top, right down. And I was just so livid. So they're going to put these little sediment ponds in. This was a sediment pond along the location road, below the landfill, or below the well pad, because this is all running down into my pond. Because I had 10 to 12 inches of silt in the back of the pond. So it was killing fish too. They would drain equipment, motor oil. As you can see, that was a bucket that they had left. They would drain some of their equipment right on the ground. Here also, These are the condensate tanks. Again, when they would leak, after they would take out their brine, their water, because there's condensate in there, because the condensate will go to another, ergon would come in and extract the condensate, and that would be your, that would go to the refinery. So then they fixed this all up because, again, it would just build up there and it would wash down and go back, right down along the location road into the pond. And by the way, the deer would go in here. And they would go down and around these tanks, and they would be licking and eating the mud because there was salt. I found 3 dead fawns on the farm. I found there were 2 in one field. There was one that was born, and it was just dying. I mean, it was just like the cattle, like the calves. I mean, it was born, but it was just sick, dying. I mean, it could never stand up. So it died in its, like a fetal position. The other 2 that I found were probably a couple weeks old. The coyotes wouldn't even touch them. So I'm like, oh man, this is not good. And of course, my horse foundered. I always had horses, I always rode. And what a lot of people don't realize, when they are exposed to chemicals, it goes to their hooves. They ruined him. And I happened to have a guy that was driving a water tanker find out, or he came up to me one day and said, I understand you're going to get rid of your horse. I said, well, he's ruined. I said, he's foundered. I said, it's got to be from the spring water and from the chemicals and everything these guys are using. So, well, I'll take it off your hands. I said, well, you know what? I'll let him go for $300. He said, $300? I said, yeah. Okay. Range put him up to it. Had to get him off my hands. Because this situation happened at Amity and Prosperity. When Jody, the horse that Ashley rode and won World on for barrel racing, twice, died because of the contamination. But guess what? They brought in a vet from Penn State, a vet from Ohio State, and the horse was crystallizing inside. They said they had never seen anything like it. Horse died, but Range wanted to take the horse off their hands. How about that? Vet said no, bury it, because we could go back 2 years to take tissue samples. This is what they do. You have no idea the cattle that have died. I gave Josh Shapiro's right-hand man, Justice Brambley, his right-hand agent, 6 pages of names and numbers of people that were impacted in Pennsylvania. This was hours and hours of work that I did, talking to people, writing down what happened, et cetera, et cetera. Some of those people were brought in for his grand jury investigation. Testified. Many of them were brought in. Never asked me. And they never tried to help me either. At all. Because I had a law firm destroy my discovery. Burns, White, and Hickton destroyed my discovery against Range. And I'm still in litigation since '07 with Howard Hanna Real Estate. I have been put through hell. My wife is gone. I lost my farm. I lost my job of going on 20 years selling heavy equipment. And I was a top salesman there for years because the company that bought us out was Murphy Tractor and Equipment Company out of Wichita, Kansas. and their mother company is Murphin Drilling. And my manager at that time came up to me and said, I don't want you talking to any of the employees regarding fracking. I said, if they ask me a question, I can't answer it. You heard what I said. Really? So you're going to tell me what I can say and what I can't say? I've had it with these people. The lawyers, they want to come at me. Bring it on, please. Bring in your defense lawyers, your big boys with their $1,000 suits. I've had enough of this. I've had enough. And I've seen the suffering and the carnage from it all. The rare cancers from it all. I'll get through these slides and I'll say a few more things. It's just condensate tanks and a dehydrator. There's another well, a vertical well there. It's probably not a horizontal well. This is the stream that comes from my pond, because that pond was a stream that was dammed up. They were doing a pipeline crossing. They were doing the repair work on it. They did not follow the permit at all. Got caught that day by the DEP. So they were, DEP was doing a good job. And that was Mark Kill. And Mark Kill told me years back, before this violation happened, that my farm was a textbook case of what not to do. And they had an album full of pictures like this thick at the DEP's office. But when Bob and I went down to do a file review, I asked where the pictures are. We don't have any pictures. So wait a minute. I was with Mark Kill and Vince Yanko when Mark introduced Vince to me, and he took pictures. I saw the picture, or I saw him taking pictures with the camera. And then Mark Kill told me he took pictures. No pictures. Oh. Well, we ended up, I had a lawyer by the name of Charlie Spear. They did file a right to know. By God, we did get some pictures. Not all of them, but we did get some pictures. Now, these guys here are digging. It's raining. It's a mess. They're digging right through this creek. They don't follow procedure whatsoever. So they stopped them. Of course, they're standing there to the left. They're always walking around dumbfounded, like they don't, we didn't know, sorry. You can see that this is what they were supposed to build, a cofferdam to put the pipe in. Well, and reroute the water and pump it. They didn't do that. They just went right through it. Then you're going to see there's oil on this water. This water is above where they're digging. That oil was in my pond. There's another slide of the wonderful job that they did and on my farm. And now don't forget, they're a good neighbor. Okay? Always keep that in your mind. They're a good neighbor. And by the way, their spokesman for Range, he lives in a $1.1 million house now. They take care of their people. But they all have blood on their hands, all of them. That, again, and I think that's Mark Kill standing up at the top of the well pad. And these pads are supposed to be reclaimed in 9 months. It was over 3 years that they came back to reclaim. And they wanted my farm. They wanted that pond. They wanted it for water. And they fracked 4 wells from that pond. And they were going to give me $10,000 per well. Because they were trying to get they were going to pay me 5 cents a gallon And I said, you can never do that for 5 cents a gallon. I never did get that $40,000. And a crime, I also had my garage broken into and my machine. If you see these, the dots and then the squares are crimes that were committed in Washington County. Because normally, crime will go up a minimum of 20% when they come to town. You have a lot of people, transient people, and they keep an eye on your time schedule when you come and go from your home. It happens. And we were getting robbed left and right in Hickory. But I did catch them, but I won't get into that. This is my neighbor's water. And they had like 10 or 12 goats. They all died. They get like neuropathy in their hindquarters, and they don't have the strength. That happened with the cattle too. And here's their water tests: the strontium, the manganese, barium, iron. Of course, there's a little cartoon. And here's a well that they plugged up. This farm was next to mine. We butted up against each other on the northeast part. That was an old abandoned well, and it communicated with a well almost a mile away. And it was just like an artesian well, just spewing up out. And then they came in, they just vented it for about 2 years, I bet. They just put a piece of corrugated plastic pipe and vented it up into the air. Is that it? Okay. All right, folks. Well, there was a whole lot more here, but I will tell you this. Slander cannot destroy an honest man. And when the flood recedes, the rock is there. I'm not going anywhere.
All right, I have a, thank you, Ron and Bob.